Welcome to the $1 Million Career, where we show you how to plan, build, and supercharge your own $1 Million career. I have with me today special guest Greg Houghtaling. Greg is a very successful private equity investor and co-founder in Vista Private Equity Group based in Houston, Texas. Vista seeks to make investments in firms positioned in the small to middle market segment. Their core investment focus is primarily in founder and entrepreneurial driven businesses facing a potential transition, which I'll let Greg explain to you a little bit more. So welcome to the show, Greg. Good morning.
Appreciate it, Rob.
How are
Thanks
things
so
in
much.
Houston?
Rainy day today, but things are good. Things are good.
Yeah, I love Houston. High energy, man. Love Houston. Love the people, and you're definitely in the right place for private equity. So let's get right to it, Greg. I gave you a brief introduction. Go ahead and add anything you want. Kind of describe what you do at Vista, and I've got some questions for you.
Yeah, let me kind of step back though and kind of give you a little bit of a pathway to how I got to Vista. So basically, I grew up in upstate New York and went to Texas A&M University back in 1981 and graduated. And back then went to work for what was then the Big Eight. I went to work for a company called Arthur Young, which became Ernst & Young, and worked in the audit group for about 8 years. And great place to start your career, learned a lot about multiple industries, all different kinds of companies, but basically reached a point where I was just ready to get on the other side of the table. I saw too many people on the other side of the table for me, making a lot of money. And I just felt like I was the guy, counting the money instead of making it. And so decided, as fate is, got a phone call one day from an executive recruiter at Toledo, Ohio, who I didn't know, and provided me with a job opportunity to go work for a conglomerate called Newell Corporation. And Newell owned a subsidiary called Goody Products. And long and short of it, I flew to Peachtree City, Georgia, interviewed, and had to convince the CFO of the whole company that I could handle the job because it was an operations controller job. So even though I was still in finance, it was very operationally oriented. We had two plants in Georgia, and we had plants up in Kearney, New Jersey, and basically convinced them that I'd learned the operations side of the business. And came back home that night and told my wife, back then we had a 1, 3, and a 5-year-old, that we were going to be moving to Manchester, Georgia. That's where the plant was. We were moving to Peachtree City if she was on board. And oh, by the way, I was taking a $10,000 pay cut too. So she said, if you think it's the right thing for your career, let's make it happen. So we did. And basically what I did was, I lived there for about 7 months, just flying back and forth every couple of weeks, because we hadn't sold our house in Houston. Back then, the real estate market was pretty tough. And so I'd work in the plant from about 6:30, actually in the office from about 6:30 till 5:30. And then I'd put a pair of jeans on and go work out with a second shift inside the actual plant. That way there, you learn the business. And that's what I did for about 7 months. And you also gain the respect of everybody out in the plant. So I did that, and it was a super successful turnaround. We took the business, we sold off some unprofitable parts of the business. We closed down 2 unionized plants up in New Jersey. We just couldn't get the union to work with us, and consolidated everything into 2 plants in Manchester, Georgia. And it was a huge success. Was there about 1.5 years, and then the senior vice president of operations, who I work with, went to work for another company as a result of the success that we had at Goody, and did that for another probably 1.5 years, another turnaround. And that was a very difficult turnaround. Quite frankly, probably didn't do enough due diligence on the job, and got there and just fought cash flow for probably 18 months. But it's funny, as you kind of go through your career, you go through these very difficult times. But when I look back on that job specifically, it was in North Florida. That was probably the best thing that ever happened to me from a career standpoint, because I really learned how to not run a business. I really learned about managing cash flow and collecting your receivables and managing your payables and your inventory. And so really fought that for about 1.5 years. And then once again, just networking and fate. I was at Atlanta airport, and I ran into one of my colleagues that I worked with at Ernst & Young back in Houston. and he had just went to work for a private equity fund in Houston. And two of the guys who are the senior partners actually hired me out of college. And they were looking for somebody with operations experience, and they were in the process of raising $500 million.
Yes.
So we ended up moving back to Houston, and that's where my real career in private equity began. And that was a company called RSTW Partners. And we raised $500 million. And at that point in time, we were managing about $900 million. And I really focused on a lot of the control deals where we were actually buying companies and we controlled them. But then also I'd get involved in any of the companies that were struggling. So I got a lot of bankruptcy experience and really just fixing businesses that were underperforming. So I then left after spending about 10.5 years at RSTW. It became clear that it was time for a change. And then myself and a good friend of mine started Vista Private Equity Group, along with one of my managing directors at RSTW. And we started Vista Private Equity Group in 2006, which, if you think about the timing, not the best timing, because the financial markets collapsed in 07, 08, Bear Stearns and Lehman. But man, we survived. We were on a low overhead business, and we were blessed to close a deal in April 2006, our first investment through Vista. And it was an energy business. It was basically an oil field consulting business that we provided retired oil and gas executives back into the business. They'd retire, but then they wanted to be a consultant. We provided consultants to oil and gas, and we started out doing a lot of drilling, but then we moved into production, and then we really started focusing on deep water. We opened up an operation in India. We opened up an operation down in Brazil, and it was a big success. We ended up selling it to a hedge fund. So that was our first deal at Vista. So, and I've been at Vista ever since 2006. We're going on 15 years, and I love it. I love it. It's been a great run, and I'm still enjoying it. I still love going to work. And, we did the Hamilton deal and, other deals along the way.
So what is it that gets you so excited and passionate about your business? You said you love it. What is it about private equity that really gets you going?
I mean, what I love about what I do, okay, and what I do is different. You always read about private equity, and sometimes private equity, gets a bad rap, and in some cases it's well deserved. But what I do is I try and buy these businesses that are small to medium-sized businesses, and typically, they've been owned by an individual for sometimes 30 years, and these businesses become near and dear to these owners. It's like marrying your first daughter. They've owned these businesses for 30 years. They've been through the ups and downs, the years when they couldn't hardly make payroll. And, but at the same time, the owners are pulling a nice amount of money out of the company. They're comfortable. But typically what happens is they reach a point in their life where they're like, hey, I want to do something. I want to start spending more time with my family, or their wife is giving them a hard time because, they're spending too much time at the office, and there's a transition that needs to happen. And so that's really where I focus my time. And, we don't go through the auction process where an investment bank will have, 300 people come in and look at a company and make the bids. We're never going to win. We just can't play in that game. I don't have the staff to do it, nor do I want to do it. And so it's a very rifle approach. A lot of it is just people that I know here in Houston and Central Texas. They know we have a great reputation for being fair, and we do what we say we're going to do. At the same time, who's ever selling us a business, they also got to do what they say they're going to do. If they tell us that the earnings are such, they got to produce those earnings. But at the same time, there's a lot of trust involved. And most of the time, when I buy these businesses, this is the first time that the owner of these businesses is going to see this huge cash windfall. So it's not just buy their business, it's buy their business, but help them figure out, here's what you got to do. You need to have estate planning. You need to know what you're going to do with your money once the business is sold. And then we're very flexible. If the business owner wants to stay involved for a period of time, that's a good thing for us. But typically when we buy these businesses, there's a lot of low-hanging fruit, because most of these individuals are looking for capital preservation. You can imagine if you're 65, 70 years old, you're not going to make a huge risk in your business. You're going to try and play it safe because you want to continue to get your distributions out of the company. Whereas we come in and we'll supercharge the business. You know, maybe there's a new product line that we need to add. You know, we need to look at the sales force and upgrade other management positions in the company. You know, marketing, systems, all these kinds of things that we can bring, you know, to the table. But our mission really isn't to go in and get rid of everybody. We don't like to do that. We like to upgrade, but you know, our model isn't come in and a company has 50 people and we cut 20 people to save a bunch of money and grow our cash flow. That's not how we operate. You know, a good example is I bought a business in December of 15. It was about a $12 million business with about 70 employees. Now that business is doing in excess of a $50 million run rate, and we have over 300 employees. He asked me before, what do I love? That's what I love. I love growing businesses. I love giving people opportunities to move up within a company. I love showing people that once upon a time worked for these little sleepy companies, and now we're doing stuff that they never thought we could ever do. That's a really cool thing. You know, I always equate business. I love sports, and so it's like a sports. You know, it's like, you know, you remember the Yankees when the Yankees were awesome. You know, it'd be the bottom of the ninth, second and third, 2 outs. They always got the hit. You know, they always got that hit to knock in the winning run. It's just it's a culture where you believe you can do anything. And that's what happens in business when you start winning and you start growing your business and you start accomplishing things. And that gets back to leadership. You know, like one of the things that differentiates Vista and myself from a lot of other private equity firms is that I'm very involved. When I bought this business at the end of 2015 that I referenced, I worked on the plant for the first 8 months. So I could really understand how the business is run, you know, the good, the bad, the ugly. And to this day, you know, 6 years later, I still work 2 days a week at the plant with the people, you know, out in the cold environment, wet environment. And the people notice that, you know, every day, every time I'm out in that plant, every one of those employees knows the owner's out in the plant, pushing the squeegee, doing all the stuff that nobody else wants to do. And that's leadership, you know, and when you lead, people are going to follow. You know, if you ask somebody to do something and you'll never do it, that's not a good thing. But if you're asking somebody to do something and you've done it, there's not an issue. And so I love Elon Musk. You know, one of his quotes of probably 6 months ago in the Wall Street Journal was, the problem with business is people need to get out of the boardrooms. They got to quit looking at all their fancy charts and get out in the plant and find out what's going on. And it's so true. That's how you learn how to run a business. That's how you learn what's wrong. The people in the plant, they might not make as much as the people in the front office, but they know. They're the smart people. They know the inefficiencies. They know how to make things better. You just got to ask them. But real important, when you ask them, you got to follow up. When somebody tells you something out in that plant, you know, you go back and you follow up on it. And sometimes the message is going to be, hey, thanks a lot for telling me. Here's why we can't do it. Or you make the change. And if you make the change, now all of a sudden more and more people start telling you things because they know you're listening to them. And that's a fundamental issue, I think, with business, is that the CEOs and the execs that are in the front office have no idea what's going on out in the plant.
Well, yeah, this sounds to me like a military special operations mission. I mean, as you know, I've got a lot of experience working with these units in terms of organizational and management, peak performance, you know, situations, and they have a thing called extreme ownership. And extreme ownership is when the guy at the top owns everything. If there's a mistake made, it's your fault, and you're not in the what we call the TOC, Theater Operations Control Center. You're out there with the ground troops. That sounds like the philosophy you have, is you're out there rolling up your sleeves, out there with your troops. And you're right, that is leadership. Management is just managing from an office, spreadsheets, charts, all that stuff. So yeah, it sounds like you guys are real strong in leadership and not as much on management.
I mean, you're a military guy, so you remember Patton, right? Why did Patton's troops love him? Because he wasn't sitting in the Jeep looking down on the battlefield. Patton was down there with his men fighting side by side. That's why people like Patton, you know? That's why Patton got credibility, you know? So yeah, I mean, the other thing is, and you kind of touched on it, is process. You got to have processes in place. When you put processes in place,
Mhm.
things are going to work better. And you're going to make mistakes, and that's okay. I have no issue with people making mistakes. If people aren't making mistakes, that means they're not really out there.
Yeah.
They're just sitting there and they're doing the same thing over and over and over and over again. And that's a big problem. And so you got to basically, try and convince people to just make some decisions, recognizing that every decision you make isn't going to work. Okay. But you know something? You learn from the mistakes that you make. Now, you don't want to make any fatal mistakes, okay, that jeopardize the long-term
Yeah.
being of the company, okay, but you're going to make some mistakes, and that's okay. And you got to let people understand that it's okay. But the biggest thing is you learn from those mistakes, and when you have
Yeah.
problems within a company, which every company has issues, you figure out what's the problem, how do we make sure it doesn't happen again? And that's normally going to be a process, that you put in place to make sure that it doesn't happen again.
I got it. Good.
But yeah, at the end of the day, it gets back to leadership. I mean, everybody in private equity, we're all smart enough to figure out whether this is a good company or not a good company. That's the easy part. What's hard is putting together a team of people that are driven and that are passionate. You can hear my voice. I'm passionate, man. I love what I do. And I need to have people on my team that love what they do and that are passionate. Because if you put a bunch of passionate people in a room, they're going to figure out a way to be successful.
Yeah. Yeah, good. So I want to transition just a little bit. So I'm sure there's a lot of people out there watching this that are thinking, man, how do I get into this business? This would be something I'd be really good at. I've got the tools, I got the attributes. I really want to make money. So what sort of advice would you give to somebody that's maybe just out of college, maybe still in college? But what kind of advice would you give to a young person that's sitting there watching you now thinking, this may be something I'd be interested in? What sort of advice would you give that person in terms of, education and experience and that sort of thing?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. First I'll say I kind of was very blessed because I didn't get into institutional private equity the way most people do. The career track for private equity is going to one of the big Ivy League schools, Stanford, it's basically your top-notch school, your top 10 kind of schools. And what most people do is they'll go to the top-notch schools and then they'll go work for an investment bank or they'll go work for a private equity firm, typically in their analyst program, which is typically a 2-year program. And then they leave the analyst program and the PE firms will actually fund their education. So let's just say, John went to Princeton, went there for 4 years, and goes to work for a PE firm in New York. And then typically they'll go back to school at Harvard or, an Ivy League type school, and they'll get their MBA. Then they go back to work for a PE firm. You'd think that a lot of the people that get into private equity have, business degrees. It's actually not always the case. There's a lot of people that have literature, just general degrees, but they're smart people. And what the analyst program does is it kind of teaches them how to think. It teaches them how to model. Modeling is a big thing when you're first starting private equity. It's basically trying to figure out what's the company look like from a financial standpoint. And so you're running all different kinds of models. And so, that's kind of the typical way that most people get into PE. But at the same time, I think it's changing a little bit. I think you're starting to get kids that are getting into private equity from some of the, maybe let's just say top 10 to top 50 schools, like Texas A&M is a great business school, and there's other examples of that. And I think also the big difference from when I was in college and now is that people really understand private equity a lot better. They're talking about it in school. When I graduated, the career path was basically went to public accounting. Now the career path is your best students are going into consulting, or they're going into private equity or investment banking. But at the same time, I have a lot of young students that are just graduating, come talk to me about their careers. And I tell them, don't let that stop you. Don't let that stop you. If you really want to get into private equity, you can do it. You just got to network. You got to network. And even if you go the consulting route for a couple of years, or you go operations, I love operations. I think operations is just super, super important. And so for somebody to get a few years of operations, And if you're a technical person, you have a petroleum engineer or mechanical engineering degree, then I always tell people I think an MBA would be great in terms of, adding more to your career because it teaches you the business side of it. But you're going to get a lot of doors slammed. That's just the way it is. It's just something you got to keep working and working and working, and eventually that opportunity will arise where you have a chance to get into a private equity firm. Okay, not all the time, but if you really want it and you really go for it, you just got to keep working hard. And eventually, I call it planting seeds. You talk to 15 different private equity firms in Houston, Texas, and maybe they don't have a job, but they keep referring you, go talk to this person. And that person says, go talk to this person. And all of a sudden, one day, they have an analyst who isn't working out or quits. And they're like, who is that person who came in here and talked to us? That's called planting seeds. It's called shelf space, and that's how you typically get opportunities. It's not just sending resumes out blindly. It's picking up the phone and talking to somebody and saying, hey, can we meet for a cup of coffee? Because my experience is people always want to help young people. Successful people love to help other people become successful, especially when people like me have had lots of people in my career that have gone above and beyond to help me. And so one of my core values is I'm always willing to help people. Very, very, when people call me and they want to talk, I'll figure out a way to meet with them. If I get a call that says, hey, I want to talk to you. Can you just give me some advice on private equity? Sure. Come on by the office. Let's have a cup of coffee. And I think most people are like that. Successful people. They love helping other people, that are driven, that really want to move their careers in the right direction. Okay.
So like if there was a guy that maybe went to a community college for 2 years and then he goes to Texas A&M or he goes to, SMU or Texas Tech and he wanted to get in private equity, your advice would be start networking with people and just get on somewhere as an analyst, maybe just get in the door. And how they do that is not necessarily sending resumes, but just picking up the phone and emailing people and just asking them for an informational interview, right? Hey, can I stop in? And
right.
And
but the other two big, but look, here's the other realities of the world. Okay. You got to have good grades. If you call me and tell me you got a 2.0, you got all C's, guess what? You're not getting in private equity. That's just the reality of it. Okay. It's expected that you're going to be really smart. It's the other things I look for is the person, do they have good interpersonal skills? There's so many people that are smart, but they have no idea of what's going on in the world. Okay. And when I'm dealing with CEOs and, captains of industry, I got to have people that can be in a meeting with me that aren't going to embarrass my firm. You follow me? And so, of course, you got to have good grades. And I tell these young college kids all the time, start out strong. Your first year, don't blow it because you're out partying or you're in a fraternity or a sorority and you get a 1.5, because all of a sudden you get this deep hole that you've dug and you're trying to climb out of it. Is it insurmountable? No. But at the end of the day, you got to be one of the top students. That's just the way it is. Okay. And the other big thing is I tell these kids all the time is modeling. You got to have Excel skills. That's a number that's so important because when you go to interview for any of these jobs at a low level, first thing they're going to ask you is how's your Excel skills? How's your database skills? How's your data analytics? All these types of things become incredibly important. And so, take online classes on how to model, LBO modeling, there's all kinds of resources. There's no excuses anymore about why you don't have a skill. It's out there. You just got to find it. And you need to spend the time and you got to dedicate yourself to becoming an expert, right? You got to, it's like me. I still read all the time because I'm trying to continue to get smarter and smarter and smarter. I tell my management teams all the time, things might be great right now, but our competition's coming and we better get better every day because the competition's getting better. And that's what happens to companies that are great and all of a sudden they're not so great is they stop getting better. They start believing that their way is the only way, and that's not the way it is. You got to get better all the time. You got to constantly challenge yourself about what can we do better, all these types of things. And it's no different than a college student. You kind of know where you're going. It doesn't matter. You have to have this career. You have to have this path. You have to have this vision, and then you got to start building to get there. I love the book Covey, The 7 Habits. It's a great book. I read that book 35 years ago, probably, but I still remember it, it's taking care of the body, taking care of the mind, listen, all these different things.
Yeah.
And it's still true, still
Yeah.
true. So,
Yeah. So we talked about skills, like listening skills and interpersonal skills, networking skills. We've talked a lot about on some of our previous podcasts about attributes, which are more like grit, determination, leadership. So if someone has the skills which are teachable, you as the employer or the private equity partner, what sort of attributes does a person have to really be successful after they get in the door? Attributes.
yeah, I'll take it beyond private equity because it can be anything. Okay. Here's the biggest things. You mentioned that four-letter word, grit. It's grit. It's basically refusing to lose, man. It's like outworking the competition. I tell people all the time, I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but I outwork my competition. I'll do whatever it takes to get the job done. Okay. And that's the way your truly successful people are. They work really, really hard. Now, the other key thing is you got to surround yourself with people that are smarter than you. And you got to know what your weaknesses are. We all have blind spots, and we're all have certain things that we're not good at, right? And a key to a person's success is really figuring out, what am I not good at? What are my weaknesses? And then you bring in people that can support your weakness. For example, if you're not a real detailed person and you hate looking at details, well, you better get a really, really good finance person in to help you out, right? That's going to be looking at the details. Maybe you're a great marketer and you can go into a conference, and by the end of the conference, everybody's name, how many kids they got. I mean, that's a huge gift that some people have. And I know people like that. But at the same time, if you have that gift, but you have no sense of detail, you got to have somebody to be part of your team. Okay. And that's the biggest thing that I see with CEOs. The best CEOs are the ones that are like the quarterback of the whole team. They bring in a great CFO, a great operations person, a great marketing person, and they know what their weaknesses are. Whereas the bad CEOs are the ones that are threatened when they bring in somebody, or when I tell them, hey, you need to hire an A player here, but they go out and they hire a B player, or they want to try and keep a piece of the business that's only theirs. Like, I want to control this over here, whereas that's not really the way to do it. If you're a great CEO, you just want to have this unbelievable team sitting around the table. So when you have your weekly staff meeting, all these people are doing, you're kind of leading, you're strategically leading, but you got a great team that's taking care and solving problems that you've identified. And so it gets back to grit, just having that just incredible motor within you that wants to succeed. Leadership, okay? Compassion. I think compassion is super, super important. When I'm out on the plant floor 2 days a week and I'm talking to people out there, I know when they have problems. I know when Pablo's wife has terminal cancer, and I go up to him and I put my arm around him and I ask him, how's everything going with your wife? And it's got to be sincere. People know that they can sense BS immediately,
Yeah.
And I always say probably one of my best gifts that I've gotten is I grew up in a very blue collar environment. My parents didn't go to college, but they taught me good values and morals. And so I know what the person out on the floor is going through because I was there once upon a time, I did it and I understand these people. And that's super, super important to be compassionate about people and really try and make changes in people's lives. And once again, you asked before about what do I love about it? That's what I love about it is that I have the ability to make change because I'm the owner of the company and I can do things that other people can't do. I always, I'll kind of sidetrack and I'll tell you an interesting story. I have people come into my office at least 3-4 times a year saying, hey, I want to be part of your organization. I want to be an entrepreneur. And I'm like, that's awesome. Let's add another leg on the stool of Vista. What do you want to do? And they start telling me that here's what I'm really good at. And I'm working for a company now, but the company I'm working at now is getting most of the economics. And I'm like, okay, put together a business plan. Let's talk about it. And we'll highly incentivize you. We'll give you a much bigger portion of the economics than you're getting now. And so this conversation will go on. And then ultimately it always gets down to this. Well, what's my salary going to be? Like you just told me you want to be an entrepreneur. You can't have it both ways. Okay. And at the end of the day, most people aren't entrepreneurial. They just aren't, because being an entrepreneur is very, very difficult. It's having total belief in yourself. And, you know, I don't have somebody every day that's telling me, great job, great job, great job, or you did this wrong, you did that wrong. It's a self-motivating thing. I got to get up every morning and go to work. I got to make change happen. And it's just something that burns within you, that you want to become better and better and better. But I just couldn't work for a big company. You know, I've done it, and I'm just not that kind of person. You know, I like to do things, you know, my way, and I like to have control. You know, if you were to look at my personality profile, you know, no surprise, I'm going to be an A personality guy. But when things start going wrong, then I become a supercharged A personality, because I don't want to fail because of other people. I'll fail because I did something wrong. And that's just what makes me tick, you know? So it's their standard stuff, you know, hard work, compassion, grit, getting along with other people, you know, making B players A players, you know? That's the other big issue that you have in business today is I'll buy these businesses and I'll see all these people within the company that, you know, are never being supervised or coached. You know, they go through every day, they're doing things and they don't even know why they're doing them. They just do it because that's the way they've done it for the last 10 years. You know, and there's a great little memo, I'm sure you've probably read it. It's called the Maximus Principle. And it's an amazing essay. And what it basically says is that we think we're helping people by keeping them around. But in fact, you're really harming people, because you keep giving them raises every year and telling them you're doing good, even though they're no longer capable of doing the job, and their salary is way out of line. And eventually they lose their job and they can't find another job because they're making a lot more than they're really worth. And that's a problem with management. You know, they're coddling people and they think they're helping them, but they're really not helping them. And so what the deal is you got to give the people the resources to be able to do the job. And some people, unfortunately, aren't going to be able to do the job. And then it's our jobs as owners and bosses to tell them that, and to help them find another job that meets what they can do. So.
How do you find young people these days in terms of their work ethic compared to, you know, 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago? I hear a lot about, it's like a drumbeat now. You know, people don't want to work anymore. They're lazy. They don't want to give 100%. What do you see out there? Because you probably come across a lot of young people in these companies that you buy. Is this just a lot of baloney, or are you still seeing people out there that really want to work hard and make money and create value?
That's a great question. I mean, you know, you read about this stuff all the time and you hear about it. You're out having, you know, a cocktail with a bunch of people, and people are bitching about, you know, these young people that they don't want to put their, you know, they don't want to pay their dues. They want to start out sitting in the corner office. And I mean, there's probably some truth to that, but at the same time, I have an amazing amount of confidence in our youth. You know, I think there's a lot of great young people out there, and unfortunately, you just don't hear about the great young people. You only hear the bad stuff, you know. And so I'm very positive about the future, and I'm positive about the young people. Do we have issues? Absolutely. Okay. But, you know, I can always find people, okay, you know, out of college, especially coming to work for a private equity firm. Okay. Now, when you get down to our portfolio companies and you're talking about, especially in our current environment, it's a big issue. It's hard to find people. And, you know, you're looking at, you know, the current unemployment, you know, you saw the jobs report came out a few days ago. We added like 50% of the jobs we thought we were going to add. So that's a head scratcher. You know, it's a head scratcher to me that, you know, restaurants can't find people to work. And part of it is, you know, I will say part of it is because there's a certain level of entitlement. You know, it's like give people more unemployment benefits. And I'm very compassionate about it. And I think we should take care of people that truly need it. But at the same time, you can't disincentivize people to stay home and not work. And that's a tricky thing. I don't have
Yeah,
any magic, bullets for it, but the original question is, I find good people. I always tell, my CEOs and my companies, along with Vista, hire the best person possible. Don't hire the B, hire the A, and the A is going to cost you more than the B. But guess what? When you hire an A player, they're going to pay for themselves. 99% of the time, the better the person you're going to hire, they're just going to be an outstanding performer. They're going to find efficiencies. They're going to do it more efficiently. I'm a big believer in less is better. I run Vista, with my partner, super, super lean. When I bring new staff on, I always tell them we have at least 2 years runway for you. I'm not going to bring a superstar on and 6 months into the deal, my partner and me are looking at each other. We don't have any money to pay the new person. That's not the way we operate. And we're very, very lean because you're going to have tough times. And in our companies that we own, we're the same way. I'd rather have A players, but less people than have a bunch of people, that are C players. And so that's always worked for me, and that's something that I'm constantly telling the CEOs that work for me is just hire really, really outstanding people. And outstanding people will basically attract more outstanding people. It's just the way it happens.
That's definitely
just
true.
One of my core beliefs is I hire superstars. Do I miss sometimes? Of course, we all miss sometimes, but overall, I've had a really good track record of hiring super, super talented people, and you got to pay them.
So what would a individual do in your company for you to say, let's say after 2 years, this is truly a superstar? Who would that person have to do? Who would that person have to be, for you to call them a superstar?
I mean, what we do is, in terms of an entry-level person coming in and a couple of years being a superstar, it's early on in their career, it's really attention to detail. It's when you ask them to run a model, the model's right. It's when you ask them to interact with, somebody on the outside of Vista and they're sending emails or letters. The emails are written properly. They sound professional. There's not misspellings. It's somebody that goes the extra mile. A good example is we were looking at a real estate deal as part of a Vista transaction, and we had a young guy that was working on the deal, real new, very, very new. And he didn't just model it. He ended up calling one of his friends who went to Southwest Texas, which was Southwest Texas, up in San Marcos, and asked them about this particular site we were looking at. And he got an unbelievable amount of intelligence from people that were currently going to school there. And it basically was enough information for us to not do the deal. That to me shows that this person is going the extra mile. They don't just want to be somebody running models the rest of their life. They want to start becoming more and more important. And, we always provide an opportunity for people to do more and more and more. But at the same time, you kind of got to learn. One of the things that a lot of young people, I think, tend to make mistakes on is they bite off too much. They get a little bit over their skis, and that's when you start making errors because you're not prepared. I tell all of our new people, listen and learn. That's the nice thing about Vista is that when we hire somebody, they're working with two principals that have been in the business for, almost 40 years. And if you listen, you're going to learn a lot, from myself and my other partner, Brent. And sometimes kids don't want to listen. They think they have all the answers when they don't. But, it all gets back to hard work. And then same thing, networking, go out to lunch, do some industry type things. And that's where we get all of our deal flow, is just through people that we know, bankers and wealth managers. And the other thing is obviously your reputation, man. You gotta do what you say you're going to do. That's the biggest thing that'll derail any career or any business is you're just not ethical. I always say it's one of the few things you have that nobody can take away, but you can give it away, right? Your ethics and your, that's a big deal. You just got to do it the right way. I always tell people, it's interesting when I hire people, I always tell them this, and it's so true. I said, your business ethics and doing the right thing, when nobody's looking. I said, eventually I can guarantee in your career, somebody's going to ask you to do something that's unethical and you shouldn't do. And that's when you're going to be tested. And,
Yeah.
I always prepare them for that. It's happened to me in my career. I was tested, and thankfully I made the right decision, because when you're tested, you might not think it's a big deal, but all of a sudden you make that first mistake and now you're in. Look what happened to Enron. A lot of those people at Enron, lower level people that got caught up in this, were good people, but they just got pressured into doing something that they shouldn't have done. And all of a sudden now you're in. Once you make the mistake and you succumb to the pressure of doing something you're not supposed to be doing, there's no turning back. So that's the other big thing that I tell people all the time, is just your ethics and doing the right thing. And it sounds easy.
Yeah, I would
but
think that, yeah, I would think in private equity, you're probably faced with a lot of moral dilemmas, particularly when you're doing due diligence and you're dealing with an owner, in terms of what you find and what you don't find. So I do agree. I think you guys, more than most, have to deal with moral dilemmas and business dilemmas.
Yeah, I mean, as far as the due diligence, I mean, to me, I'm just very transparent. When I'm selling a company, and this is good advice for anybody that's selling a business, is be transparent. Get all the stuff. Every business has issues. There's no perfect business, right? And so if you're selling something, get all the issues on the table so that the buyer knows that. Because if you try and hide something, people are smart. We're going to find it. I'm going to find it. I've done this a long time. I know where all the freaking bodies are buried, right? And so, and that's a negative, because once again, it gets back to trust. Why didn't you tell me that, Mr. Seller? And then also what ends up happening is, that's where you hear these stories where somebody says they're going to buy a company for X and then the price goes down. It's typically because somebody didn't give you all the information that you should have had. Okay. And so the best time to get all the issues on the table is early on, because as a seller of a company, you're going to have the most leverage before you get that first letter of intent. So get it all on the table and just talk through it in terms of how you're going to, here's the issue, but here's how we resolve the issue, that type of thing. So, but in terms of, it's always emotional when you're buying a company from a small business owner, because as I said earlier in our conversation, a lot of them have owned the business for 10, 20, 30 years. And there's just a lot of blood, sweat, and tears in the business. And I tell people, I always tell the owners of these businesses, this isn't going to be fun. Yeah, you might get a bunch of money when we get it done, but going through the due diligence process, answering questions, is very difficult. And, I always like to say almost every deal dies once. There's an emotional, something happens, don't like the questions you're asking, and then cooler minds will prevail. And that's why it's really, really important to develop relationships with whoever you're buying the company with. And it gets back to, once again, trust, because the biggest thing that'll kill a deal is a lack of trust. When you're not honest with a business owner, that type of thing. And, even though we don't do auctions and we're only dealing one-on-one with the business owners, you got to be fair. Think about what would happen if I bought your business, right? And you were not as sophisticated, and I basically paid for the business something that was not market, right? And all of a sudden you're at the country club talking to your buddies, having a couple of drinks, celebrating your deal. And one of your buddies says, what'd you sell your company for? What multiple? You tell them, they're like, what the heck? Man, these guys freaking stole your business from you, right? You're going to end up basically not having any credibility in the marketplace. Yeah, you might have got that deal done, but you're not going to do many more deals because you're not an honest broker. And so, but that's the other big thing, is you got to be honest with people, give them a fair purchase price. It's probably not going to, I always tell people, if you're looking for the last nickel, that's not what we do. Go to an investment banker. They're amazing. They're going to do a great job, but we're going to take your business and your legacy and grow it. That's our pitch. We're going to make you proud. We're going to take this business that's doing 15 million in revenue, and we're going to grow it to 100 million. We're not going to change the name on the side of the building. We're not going to get rid of all your people. And that sells with certain owners. Certain other owners are like, hey, I want the last nickel. I'm like, that's fine. I get it. Go hire an investment banker. When we sell most of the companies that we buy, we hire an investment banker, because we're trying to sell the business at the highest price. So
how would you describe the difference between private equity and investment banking? A lot of people are probably wondering. I'm not even sure I know myself.
I mean, investment banking is, I mean, there's lots of different pieces of investment banking, but there's buy side. So they're advising buyers of businesses. There's sell side where they're advising people that own a business that want to sell it. And, when I look at investment banking, they also raise debt for people, they raise equity. But at the end of the day, pure investment banking, as I look at it, is you hire somebody to help you buy a company, sell a company, look at strategic opportunities for the business, your capital raises. And as a young person, you go in there and typically you're going to be working lots of hours. You're not going to have a good social life. Let's just put it that way. You're going to be working 80 hours. You're going to be working 80 hours, 90 hours a week. You're going to be doing a lot of putting books together, running models, they do a road show. They'll go all around the country, talking about the company. Maybe the company's going public, right? And they're pitching it to all these money managers. And as a new guy, you're sitting down at the end of the table and you're not really doing anything. You're not really a part of the meeting, right? But you're the person that's setting up the road shows. You're the ones helping put together the books. And it's not a bad career. You can learn a lot, and you're going to be running around with probably the smartest people that you'll ever work with when you look back on your career. And so I would never tell somebody don't do it, but just understand what you're getting into. If you're a type of person that wants to have a 50-hour a week job and you want to coach your kid's baseball team, it's probably not the best career to start, right? Private equity, that's a big word and it's a big industry. It means a lot, okay? But from my perspective, the private equity that we're working in is, it's kind of a little piece of it. Private equity is effectively all these different pension funds. Okay, a good example is the state of Virginia has a teacher's pension fund. Okay, and all the teachers, part of their paycheck goes into their pension. And a lot of it are what's called a defined benefit, which basically is kind of a guaranteed benefit to those employees. And so there's people that work for the state of Virginia and their job is to basically manage this fund of money. Just think of it as a big bucket of money. Most of the money goes into the stock market, or they buy bonds, or they invest in real estate. And there's a small piece of it, which is called alternative investments. That's where state of Virginia will invest a piece of that money in private equity firms like KKR, all these big boys that you heard about, okay? And what KKR and these guys are doing is they're investing in typically private, sometimes public, but it's not like it's an illiquid investment. So it's not the kind of investment where the state of Virginia can say, hey, I want to sell this piece of stock tomorrow. Typically, it's a 5 to 7 year kind of investment hold. But typically the returns have been better on private equity. And so as we read in the paper and you read about all these cities and states and municipalities that have these big unfunded pension obligations. What's going on is it's forcing these pension managers to get better yields on the amount of money that's sitting in this big bucket of pension money. And so more and more money is being allocated to private equity. Okay. Now I'm in the private equity business. In my past, when I worked at RSTW, we raised money from CalPERS, IBM, state of Virginia, all these different, big pension funds. Now at Vista, all of our money that we raise is from high net worth individuals and our own money. So I'm still a private equity, but I'm just not doing like institutional private equity.
Nice. Right.
It's a much more, we have our own model of doing business. Okay. And we have a lot less constraints in terms of our reporting and that type of thing that you would have, with your typical big pension funds, because with your big pension funds, typically you do a deal and you have a committed bucket of capital and you're generating management fees on that capital. And then when you need money, there's a process where you basically tell them, I need X amount. They have so many days to wire you the money. Whereas my business is a lot different because I'm dealing with high net worth people and I might need capital and I'm trying to find this high net worth person and they're in the Mediterranean somewhere on a sailboat, traveling. So it's just a different concept, but at the end of the day, it's still about investing in real estate or investing in private companies and generating returns for our investors.
I got it. I got it. Well, yeah, it sounds like private equity is a very interesting business. It blends a lot of financial expertise with investment expertise, a lot of judgment. Is there a single piece of advice you would give a young person who wants to get into private equity?
I mean, as I said before, you got to kind of, and it doesn't begin when you graduate from college. It begins when you go to college. And as I said earlier, getting good grades. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Taking financial accounting, making sure you know how to model, become an Excel expert, as you're in college, do an internship, try and work for a private equity firm when you're a junior or senior in college, and try and get a diverse kind of background, get a little operations experience, get a little financial experience. And sometimes that means you're going to go work for somebody and you're just working there. It's like, I don't even care if you pay me. I just want to get experience, right?
Yeah.
It's a resume builder. Sometimes, I have people that come to me all the time and say, I don't even want to get paid. I just want to be able to put on my resume that I worked at Vista Private Equity Group for a summer, or maybe it's 3 weeks during the Christmas break. You never know. A firm might have a big project going on and they need a smart young person who's a junior or senior in college. I mean, but it gets back to, you got to be aggressive and you got to be calling around and you got to be networking with your professors. You got to be networking with all the recruiters that come to school, and interview kids.
So I know you have a secret sauce. You've got your own business model for making money. I'm not asking you to reveal, what your secret sauce is, but what is the basic model for making money in private equity? Is it you make money on the front end or the back end or fees, or how does it work?
The secret sauce. Look, you make money by, first of all, knowing what you're good at. Okay. What are you good at? I'm not going to be a technology investor. I learned a long time ago, if I can't explain the business that I'm buying or investing in, I'm not going to invest in it. I'm not a Bitcoin guy. Okay. So I'm not going to go out and invest in a big Bitcoin operation. So I learned a long time ago, I'm really good at meat and potatoes, manufacturing, service, distribution. And I'm a big believer in, buying businesses that have generated profits and cash flow over a long period of time. It doesn't mean that we won't do a turnaround, but it's got to be a turnaround because management messed up the company or there's a bad balance sheet. But I'm not going to do a turnaround that's just a bad business. There's businesses out there that are just bad businesses. And normally you can tell because they're not making any money, right?
Yeah, right.
And ultimately, you see a lot of businesses out there that, are going public or, they're just not generating cash flow. Eventually, you got to generate cash flow. That's how you pay your bills. And so, so what's the secret sauce? The secret sauce is find good businesses that are run by great management teams. Okay. Or if there isn't a great management team, we have the ability to supplement and bring in some great management team members, okay, that can take this business to the next level. And then through our back office experience, systems, and just knowing how to grow a business, we take these businesses that are doing 10 to 20 million of revenue and supercharge them and take them from 75 to 100 million. And typically what ends up happening is as you grow a business and the cash flow of the business grows significantly, then all of a sudden your multiples are going to expand. And that's how you make money. You make money. It's real simple, Rob. When you buy a business and the cash flow you buy is 2 million and you buy that cash flow at 5 times, which says you're paying 10 million for the business. If I can grow that 2 million of cash flow to 10 million of cash flow, first of all, I've taken that cash flow and grown it by 8 million. Even if I have the same multiple of 5, I've created $40 million of value, right? Because I've grown the EBITDA by 8 million and my multiple is still 5. So the key is you want to grow EBITDA. That's the key.
Right.
But you also want to grow your multiple. And the bigger the
Interesting.
company and the more strategic that you've built this business, you're going to get paid a higher multiple, right?
I got you.
The multiple reflects, what kind of a business you have. If you have
Yeah.
if there's issues with the business is going to have a lower multiple. If it's a high growth business and you're doing something that other people aren't doing, your multiple is going to expand. So under that scenario, if I could grow my multiple from 5 to 8, and all of a sudden I take it three, I've increased that multiple by 3, right? And if I'm doing 10 million of EBITDA, that's another 30 million of value that I've just created, right?
Yeah.
That's that's the secret sauce. Okay.
That's the secret sauce.
And of course, you
Now,
manage
before
your
you-
working cap. The other secret sauce is you manage your working cap. I can't tell you how many board meetings I've been in for the first time. I asked the question, how quickly do you collect your receivables? And they're like, well, we collect our receivables in about 45 days. And then I ask them, well, how quickly do you pay your payables? Well, we pay our payables in 30 days. Well, guess what's happened? Those are the businesses that as you're growing, you're taking on all kinds of debt to support the growth. I like a business where I collect my receivables in 25 days and I pay my payables in 30, and I turn my inventory. And so it's just not growing your EBITDA and becoming more profitable. It's managing this working capital cycle. How quickly do you turn your inventory? How quickly do you collect your receivables? Do you manage your payables? Because it's amazing when you start looking at, if I can collect my receivables 5 days quicker than I am right now, it's amazing how much cash flow you can generate on the balance sheet.
Wow.
And so, if you ask me, that's the secret sauce. I think once again, we're all good at finding good businesses, but it's what do you do with the business once you acquire? Are you going to really create value and grow the EBITDA and strategically change the business and bring in great people? They're going to help you change the business. That's the key.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, here's the other
Yeah.
thing. This is important. The other thing is when I buy a business, I'm not trying to buy a business that's doing 2 million of EBITDA and over 5 years grow it to 3, like a widget distributor. Okay. I'm trying to buy a business that I can scale. You hear that term all the time, scalability. It's just like your recruiting business. Okay. How do you scale the business? And if I can't figure out a way to take a business from 20 to 100, I'm not probably going to be interested. And maybe 100 is exact, maybe 20 to 50. I got to grow that business because otherwise I get bored really quickly. I'm trying to strategically change the business.
That's an interesting point. It's always been fascinating to me to differentiate between, you hear people say minders, grinders, and finders, So a guy that's a classic entrepreneur, founder of a company, great idea, does everything great except knows how to scale a company.
Yeah.
So what's the secret to being able to scale a company? Is that a skill or, how do people scale a company? What kind of a skill is that?
You use a great example. I can't tell you how many different times I've looked at businesses and had people come in my office that have an amazing idea, a great product, and typically what I tell them is, I'm not the right guy right now because you're going to give up all your equity in the business. Go out and try and get this product or this idea to the point where you have a purchase order. A great example is in the energy business here in Houston. I have people come in to us all the time. I have this great green idea. I have this great new product that's going to make the oil companies a lot more efficient, or a piece of software that's going to increase, the efficiency of a drill bit, whatever it is. And what I tell them all the time is, if this is such a great idea, go to one of the major oil companies, have them fund it. If this technology is that good, especially if it's green. The energy companies right now, if there's anything green that makes sense, they're going to invest in it because they have to. They want to put it in their fancy annual report that I'm being socially responsible and I'm being green, right? But what happens is most people can't get it from concept in their head to actually in the market where they're selling it and they're generating cash on their balance sheet. And it kind of gets back to, that's where they got to figure out. I said earlier about you got to know what you're good at, what you're not good at. You might be a great technical guy with a product, but you got to find somebody who's the marketer, right? That can go and open up the doors and get your product out into industry. And, as far as getting back to scalability, that's just experience. It's just looking at a business and figuring out, how do I get it from 10 million or 20 million to 50 million? It's just experience. Is there a new product line? Is there a potential acquisition out there that I could bolt onto this company? Is there a geographic region that I'm currently not serving that if I did serve, I could generate more revenue? It's just experience. And of course, you got to be analytical and smart about how do you figure out how do I get this company from X to Y.
Yeah, very good. So, I mean, the takeaways for me are, how to, what are the critical success factors for particularly a young person who's interested in private equity? It's good grades, be continually networking with your professors, industry leaders, recruiters on campus, develop the skill of spreadsheets in terms of modeling, get some operational experience, and it's always good to have grit. So how do you get grit? Competitive sports, a lot of it is either you have it or you don't, but you got to be determined. Those are some of the critical success factors we talked about. What is the model for private equity? You talked about there's several different sides and angles to private equity, and how do you make money? It's increasing your EBITDA, increasing your multiple. I'm sure you guys make fees along the way. It's a very, very interesting business. I learned a little bit more about the difference between private equity and investment banking. Is there anything else you'd like to share, Greg?
I think you just made a good point about, grit. One of the things I've learned is that it's hard to teach somebody grit.
Yeah.
It's hard to teach somebody to be a hard worker. Quite frankly, you got it or you don't. Can I motivate people? I can motivate people, but at the end of the day, you got it or you don't. Some people are just born, they're driven, and they refuse to lose, even though we all lose, we all do things. We're all going to have some losses. Okay. It's not all, everything works out perfectly. And it's being able to pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and keep moving forward. That's life.
Yeah.
You're going to get knocked down, and you just got to get back up and keep moving forward and learn from when you trip and you fall. And that's what it's all about. It served me well over a long period of time. I wish I could tell you that everything I touch turned to gold. It doesn't. Sometimes you lose, but it's not a sprint. That's the other thing I tell people. It's not a sprint. It's a marathon, And,
yeah, exactly.
And the other thing, quite frankly, Rob, is, I don't have the whole quote in front of me, but it's like, it kind of goes like this: in the grand design of any successful career is the element of timing, is the ability to seize the moment without wavering. And that's a key thing with people. There's a lot of people that are in an unbelievable opportunity. It's there, man, for the taking, right?
Yeah.
And they don't seize it. They play it safe. And this unbelievable, light that's flickering goes out because they never are going to be what they could have been by taking a chance. Now, you don't take dumb chances, you take calculated risk, right? But I see people all the time that are in great positions or great opportunities to do something in their careers, and they just like, I'm going to play it safe. I'm going to stay here, and I'm going to continue to do what I've always been doing. And it's really sad when I see people that I know could be much more, and they just never really grasp for it. You know what I mean? And so,
I think that quote, maybe fortune favors the bold, right?
It's good too. That's another good one. Exactly. That's another good one. But
fortune favors the bold.
But at the end of the day, the other big thing I tell people all the time is it shouldn't be just about the money. Okay.
Right.
I deal with people all the time that have so much money, and most of the time it ends in a sad story. They're never home. Their families are broken. They don't have relationships with their kids. And so I'm always big about do something you love. Do something you love. Do something you're passionate about. Because if you love something and you're passionate about it, first of all, you're going to be happy.
Yeah.
Secondly, you're normally going to be pretty darn successful if you're doing something that you love and you're passionate about. So if you just build your career on, I want to make the most money, and you keep jumping from job to job because you're getting a little bit more money.
Yeah.
I think that's a really bad way about going through your career. I think you just do things that you love and you're passionate about it. I love going to work. I've never had a job that I hated. Now, was my job perfect? Of course not. There's always going to be things you don't like about a job. But at the end of the day, we each have the ability when we get out of bed in the morning to say, hey, I'm going to make it a freaking great day, or I'm going to complain and not make it a great day. That's our choice. That's
It's a
the cool thing
decision.
about it. We control that. Every day we can control whether we want to be positive, a glass half full person, or we want to be the negative Nelly. And I don't like
Yeah.
negative Nellies. Life's too short for me to hang out with negative Nellies. I want positive people. That's kind of.
Oh, you're definitely a winner. It's like Mike Singletary when he coached in the Niners and Vernon Davis was on the sidelines and he walked them into the locker room, and in the press conference, Singletary said, I want winners. Winners. I want winners. It's the same thing. Yeah, so.
Same thing.
Well, thank you for sharing your thoughts, and thank you for joining us today. So how do people get a hold of you, or how do they get a hold of Vista Private Equity Group?
Well, we have a website, just do a search, Vista Private Equity Group, Houston, and www.vistagroup.llp.com, and you'll see contact information on there. But Rob, it's been a pleasure, real pleasure talking to you. Hopefully some of my insights and experiences will help some of the people that listen to this, but really appreciate it. And you have a great weekend and a happy 2022.
Thank you very much. And for our viewers, we encourage you to subscribe below so that you don't miss any future episodes, which will be released every other Tuesday at 7 a.m. East Coast time. Thanks so much for watching, and look forward to seeing you again on the next episode of $1 Million Career, where we'll continue to help you plan, build, and supercharge your own $1 Million Career. Thank you very much for watching and listening today, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.